Have you thought about child medical tourism? Do you even know what that is? Well, today I'm going to share what child medical tourism is and what you need to know if you decide on this option for your child. And stick around to the end where I'm going to share the top pediatric hospitals offering advanced treatments for childhood illnesses, genetic disorders, and developmental disabilities. So let's get into it. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to discuss child medical tourism or pediatric medical tourism. There are different names with the same meaning. So for this video, I will use the term child medical tourism. Now, child medical tourism is the movement of children to and from a country to another country to seek medical advice, diagnosis, and treatments. Now, children's medical tourism includes many different activities that take place for a number of reasons. You'll find that parents often seek treatment for their children abroad for a number of reasons, like the treatment or the advice isn't available in their own home country, treatment's too expensive, they don't trust the quality of what is available locally. Parents may also go abroad because they have cultural, family, or linguistic connections with another country, or they just feel better supported. And in some of those instances, traveling to countries with fewer healthcare resources. They also will opt for child medical tourism because the treatments and diagnoses may be well established wherever they are considering traveling to. Or on the flip side, treatments and diagnoses may be new and only available in certain places. So new treatments may be widely recognized or based on disputed or inconsistent or even absent evidence, maybe for something like a holistic approach, because in the US, medical professionals and medical insurance companies do not support or reimburse for holistic treatment. Another reason may be some treatments may be unavailable because they are legally restricted or prohibited in the originating country, but not in one or more countries abroad. Okay, so there's a wide range of reasons. Now, the expansion of child medical tourism actually appears to have gained more awareness through the internet and also through social media platforms, which actually allow parents to widely publicize their cases. It also builds emotional connections through social media, and they also seek alternative treatments and providers and to raise funds. So social media platforms have been used for a number of different reasons throughout child medical tourism. Now, obviously, there are very different children are very different from adults, and there's not a lot of research available on child medical tourism. Now, children have different needs and sometimes suffer from different illnesses, and usually do not make the decision to travel abroad themselves. Right? They're minors. Parents, with the exception of few, are usually dedicated to doing what's best for their children, and this can make parents especially vulnerable to exploitation if their child is sick. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to cover this topic. Now, children's medical tourism has the potential to widen choices. It can also spur some innovation and contribute to economic growth in the country where they're planning to have the procedure or treatment. Now, it also raises many medical, ethical, economic, and regulatory and legal issues. Now, these affect the way children's medical tourism is viewed by professionals and mean that parents may be unsure which overseas providers to trust. Now, I'm going to briefly share a few cases, examples in the UK, and then I can cover some other areas of child medical tourism you need to know about. But I thought it would be good to share some actual cases with you so you kind of see the dynamic and all the layers that are involved whenever you are engaging in child medical tourism. So, in one case, there was a family of a 10-year-old boy with an aggressive cancer of the jaw, where his parents decided to return to their native Poland. Now, they lived in the UK, but they were returning to Poland. And it was only after refusing to consent to conventional therapy, chemo, radiation in the UK. Now, despite doctors advising that non-treatment would inevitably be fatal, his parents sought treatment of the cancer with alternative means, the holistic treatment. So the family returned to Poland for the treatment of their 10-year-old son and could not be traced in Poland, which meant it actually curtailed further intervention despite the English courts formally retaining jurisdiction in the case. Now, I don't know the outcome of that one, but I'm just bringing that particular case up to show you that depending on what your choices are for a plan of treatment for your child or your children, this is where the courts may step in if they actually disagree with you. There are cases where they agree, and I'll share some of those as well. But if they disagree, what that means for you is that it can actually hold you up and prevent you from traveling to another country for the type of treatment that you desire for your child. So I want you to be aware of that. All right. In another case, despite advice that proton beam therapy would give no clear advantage over conventional treatment for a little boy's cancer, again, the conventional way, radiation and chemo is what they were offering. But this family chose proton beam therapy, something that they learned about. Now, his parents nevertheless located a hospital in Prague willing to give him the therapy. Following the family's flight, they actually went to Prague. The parents put forward what was considered a coherent and reasonable treatment plan that was given to them by those physicians in Prague. The UK government actually intervened and they made funds available for the little boy to receive the treatment in Prague. Now, while this little boy's medical needs meant that travel was felt to place him at risk of significant harm, recent cases have actually involved children so unwell that only a medical transfer would be possible. So that's another thing that you all need to be aware of as well. The current condition of your child at the time that you are seeking treatment abroad. Are they well enough to travel? This is something where even if you're approved for the treatment, if it's deemed that they're not uh, able to be transferred safely because of their condition or their medical condition may worsen along the way of travel, then that's something where the courts can step in and actually block you from taking your child to a place where you have been approved to see to have the treatment. So keep that in mind. In another case, once the hospital formed the opinion that pursuing experimental or any treatment was no longer in the boy's best interest, his parents actually sought to travel to settings outside of the UK willing to provide the experimental therapy. Now, they received offers from both a New York hospital, and also the Vatican hospital. And the little boy was granted permanent US residence to expedite travel to the USA. So here in this one, this is one of those things where you will find that in certain cases, there may be the jurisdiction where you're planning on having treatment may do things that will help expedite your case to have the child travel as quickly as possible, granting some type of residence, permanent residence, temporary residence, whatever it may be, just to expedite the process. Okay. Now, in some cases, while there were no overt plans for international travel, some parents' legal teams obtain an expert opinion that the child is fit to travel to X country. And there are times where that's not granted. So that's something you need to think about. So, despite another country accepting the case to treat the child, the government, and it's usually based on some expert opinion of expert that they've selected, deems the child healthy or unhealthy enough to travel for treatment. And think about it also when you're filing these documents, oftentimes it still takes a bit of time for it to be seen before the courts. So that may play a role in terms of at the time you filed, the child was a bit healthier, and they probably their health could have declined as you were waiting for your case to be heard. So that's another thing to consider as well. Another case, there was a 2-year-old girl that was with an undiagnosed syndrome causing progressive developmental delays, epilepsy, and also severe brain damage. Now, she was on life support, and the hospital sought to withdraw ventilation, but was vigorously, obviously, opposed by the parents. Now, while his doctors in the UK, her doctors in the UK, sought permission to withdraw treatment, her parents wanted her transferred to a children's hospital in Rome, where she'd been accepted for further medical investigations and a continuation of life support. Now, her parents actually aggressively used social media to engage supporters. They used it for raising funds, like doing some type of crowdfunding platforms, where they raise funds. And they also sold a campaign merchandise on behalf of the child, raising funds for the child. Now, the case garnered global attention, including influential figures, including the Pope and the Polish president. Now, protests took place outside the hospital, and even court members of the of the public and the public mobilized through social media who referred to themselves as the child's army. Okay, they were advocates for this child. Now, hospital staff unfortunately suffered some online abuse, and also protesters attempted to storm the hospital building at one point. Now, despite all of this, the hospital trusts were granted permission to withdraw treatment. Now, following the failure of that case in successive courts, including an earlier application to the European Court of Human Rights, this child's parents sought a hearing from that court on the basis that preventing their child's transfer to Italy was a violation of her rights, her convention rights to liberty and security. Now, in the interim, while they were filing, that child was granted Italian citizenship by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the hope that this would facilitate this transfer. Now, in the event, the European court actually ruled the application was inadmissible, despite the child being granted Italian citizenship. So there's a whole lot to unpack, and obviously, there's no one size fits all depending on the nature of the case. In all of these cases, the parents of the critically ill children sought treatment outside of the UK and or second opinions from overseas specialists to obtain better treatment options that were contrary to the advice of their healthcare teams. Okay. Now, the recent upsurge in cases involving this cross-border type of issue, it's very significant, and some early cases actually involve international travel as the potential issue. So it seems only now that the key elements are in place that child medical tourism can emerge as a significant issue. Now, despite its growing importance, there is very little research that actually explores child medical tourism. The literature that's available has identified several different forms of child medical tourism, which I covered earlier. But these address challenges to a child's protective rights under the UN CRC, which protects children. Now, the difficulties in enforcing private contracts across national boundaries causing a similar loss of rights of parents as consumers of healthcare services, and also a presumed economic impacts for national healthcare systems, drawing that money away, which obviously, as a parent, that's not a concern, right? About any of the economics that are imposed. You're thinking about excuse me, the health of your child. Now, numerous local or multinational solutions have actually been proposed to improve the legal position in these types of cases. Health systems where destination institutions actually receive accreditation from entities in the originating jurisdictions have already been developed on a small scale. But some actually argue that expanding protections in originating countries, for example, by strengthening accreditation programs, by imposing legal requirements for them, or by just reforming consumer protection law, is at least part of the solution. Okay, no one truly knows because there haven't been enough cases, and there's so many different laws worldwide that it's almost impossible to keep track, right? Now, these reforms may have little impact where novel treatments are being sought, but more robust consumer protections actually lie in the development of international accords. So some are saying, like how you have existing trade accords, for other things that can be applied to the case of child medical tourism, because the existing trade accords tend to reduce rather than increase protections. That's a concern. So new agreements would be needed, as well as like a regulating body to police them, because there's so much when it comes to healthcare, and it's so unpredictable. You could not have a regulation for every circumstance that could arise. Okay. Now, some experts have also proposed the creation of an international convention on patient rights, similar to existing human rights agreements. The thing about that is, while it addresses the unsatisfactory legal position head on, those types of agreements seem unlikely. Okay. Since medical tourism is a major source of revenue to several countries, the ability to agree to such accords will depend largely on the ability of the originating jurisdiction to leverage their position as consumers. Now, greater leverage actually assumes some way to influence the flow of us, health consumers. And this is in turn requires governments to adopt a less lax approach to global healthcare trade. The flow of child medical tourists may be too low or even too controversial, given the questions around children's rights and what I shared earlier with you. But it presents obstacles for their inclusion in any potential agreement. So local laws need to be developed first in order to clarify national positions on child health tourism before serious work can actually begin at the international level. Because in the absence of this, it would seem practical that child medical tourism is only undertaken when parents are fully cognizant of their legal position if things were to go wrong, and only then with the active involvement of and the support of recognized expert clinical teams in both the origin and the destination countries who are well acquainted with the child. The problem is that type of support doesn't necessarily mean that there's full agreement between both sets of healthcare practitioners. But it does imply that the approach taken is clearly one that is medically reasonable. Okay. Again, this is a difficult in situations where there is a significant dispute between the parents and the healthcare practitioners, but it's not impossible. Nonetheless, there is a need for additional research in this area of child medical tourism to develop a more consistent approach. All right. So I hope that was helpful. And as promised, I am going to share the top 10 pediatric hospitals globally. This was taken from Newsweek's The World's Best Specialized Hospitals of 2023. So the top 10 pediatric hospitals globally. Number one, Boston Children's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, in the US. Number two, Hospital for Sick Children, that's in Toronto, Canada. Number three, Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, UK. Number four, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, or they call it CHOP for short, in Philadelphia, US. Number five, BC Children's Hospital, Vancouver, Canada. Number six, Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary, Canada. Number seven, Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Texas, in the US. Number eight, Children's Hospital of Los Angeles in Los Angeles, California, US. Number nine, Queensland Children's Hospital in South Brisbane, Australia. And coming at number 10, Anne and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago in Chicago, Illinois, in the US. Now, these are the top 10 on a list of 200, which is inclusive of hospitals in all regions of the world. I put a link in the description so that you can access the full listing of the 200. Now, certainly you do not need to be limited to the top 10 that I mentioned. I suggest that you make your decision on reviewing the entire list based on what type of treatment that you're going for and the condition of your child for travel. And then you determine which hospital best meets your needs. Okay. It may be more optimal or even more convenient to travel to a hospital closer to your country of origin. So don't rule that out. Okay. Also, if there's a hospital that is not on the list, that does not mean that it's not a good hospital. I would just make sure you do your research on whether the hospital is accredited by a globally respected entity like the Joint Commission International, which is the gold standard for safety and quality of care. And I also put their link in the description. So if you've engaged in child medical tourism, please comment down below on your experience and any tips that you may have for others, okay? If this information was helpful to you or someone you may know, don't forget to please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you know when I post another video. Until then, be well.